Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance.
Well, welcome to Chapel. We're excited to be able to chat with you guys this morning a little bit. And I have the coolest people on campus with me. Shout out to Brittany. She wasn't able to make it. She's in charge of our prayer, arts, and worship ministries right now while Jared's out on paternity leave. Shout out to Jared, too, if he's going to watch this. I don't know. He's probably at home with his kids. But we have Peter and Jennifer. So how about you guys just introduce yourselves, let everybody know kind of what you do for student ministries, and then we'll start chatting from there.
Sure. Well, I'm Jennifer Graves, and I oversee discipleship ministries here on campus. So that's D groups and the River and the Challenge and men's and women's mentorship, all sorts of ways of deepening in your discipleship.
My name is Peter Wopel. I'm the Associate Chaplain of Local Outreach. So I oversee all of our local volunteering programs that have been a little bit quieter this year, but still operating and looking forward to getting programs next year.
Yeah. And how long have you've been here? Like, is it 10 years, Peter?
Yeah, basically as a student and staff member. I was a student here for 3.5 years, and this is my 6th as a staff member. So yeah, coming up on the 10-year mark.
Yeah. And Jennifer, you're kind of new, but you're very familiar with Trinity.
Yeah, that's right. It's only my 2nd year here, but I'm a Trinity alum too. So I came here, I graduated in 98. So 94 to 98, I guess, were my years as a Trinity student here, and was in student ministries as a student leader at that time too.
Look at that. Look at how Jesus will bring you full circle.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, I figured for today, for Chapel, we just wanted to talk to you guys, the Trinity student population, just about the book of James, and share a little bit about some of our experiences with James this semester, and then talk to you all a little bit about how we've been navigating the pandemic, just like the rest of you guys. So is there anything in the book of James that for you has felt, really pivotal this semester?
I think for me, there's just been sort of so much of a sense of the need for simplicity in all of this. I think about my life a year ago and think about how complex it was in so many ways. Like work, class, church. Going to a couple of different church groups. Volunteering in different places, all sorts of extracurriculars, like hanging out with friends a couple of times a week. Thinking about going back to visit my family in Oregon, like all of these different things that it just made life really hectic, and I feel like I wasn't even someone that necessarily stacked my schedule as much as some people do. I know some people were even more on that side of things, and then with the pandemic as a whole, just bringing sort of everything, flattening it all out a little bit, cutting out all the extra stuff, sort of. I feel like in some ways that's really what I've seen in James and come to appreciate over the last years. In some ways it takes so much of the complexity of the theology and spiritual themes that sort of come before it in the Bible, and as I think about my own faith and how often I can maybe overcomplicate it, and then coming to James, it's pretty simple. Pretty pragmatic, it's let your yes be yes and your no be no. Don't speak deceitfully, don't slander other people, pray earnestly and honestly, and God will respond. I feel like there's just so many themes of simplicity and earnestness that I've found really helpful in a time that has felt like it's sort of had to become more simple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess as always, I really, when I think of James and when I sat in James, this time was a lot different than when I was younger. When I was younger, I have to say I've kind of avoided James over the past several years, true confessions. I have really just, because when I was growing up, in my church, even as a young adult and things, James was kind of the works book. And so it was taught a lot in our church. Like we went through James quite a bit. And it was like faith without works is dead. And it kind of became this book of contrasting kind of salvation by works and salvation by grace. And I just could not ever reconcile that kind of contrast in a sense. So I really struggled with that and kind of had a lot of questions myself. And so I couldn't really find my way at peace with James very much. So then my more adult life, like beyond those years, I just kind of avoided it, dealt with it by not reading it very much and all of that sort of thing. This time through, so now that I have been intentionally invited into the book of James, thanks to that Reverend James.
No problem.
And also some of my D group leaders and some of my ministry team people have been really sinking into James this time as well. So it's been coming up at our one-on-ones, which is really cool. So, and it has been very different for me going through it this time. What has really stood out to me this time is not this, like I see where my church and my growing up got the contrast between faith and works and like went into that. But what I really see this time is that faith from our faith, if our faith is real and authentic, the overflow of that will be in our bodily expressions, like in our actions and in our relationships with one another. And I love James's focus, the way he keeps coming back to the rich and the poor. And, you know, why do we treat the rich with preferential treatment? And why do we neglect the widow and the orphan and the poor and the marginalized in our midst? And so that has been just to see that and realize that our faith overflows in works of justice and works of care for the poor, works of care for the widow and the orphan. And so this time through, I've been reminded a lot of the prophets, actually, the prophets speaking to God's people about why do you claim to follow God, but you ignore the needy in your midst. And so that theme of not ignoring the needy in our midst and not they prioritizing those people who look like they have it all together. Has just really stood out to me. And of course, we see the themes of suffering and persevering in suffering that I think we can't almost help but see during this time of COVID. Endurance and not slandering one another, like speaking well, like our speech. In the midst of that, there was the one verse I have to say personally about not grumbling. I was like, felt a little personally convicted there, you know, reading about our speech. And during a difficult year, sometimes I have had to remember this, right, Jen? No grumbling, no grumbling. So I just feel like, as Peter said, James is so practical. I love that about him now, actually, and that's how I've seen it as very pragmatic and how our faith should birth this. It should flow over. And so, of course, it's dead. Faith without works is dead because if it doesn't overflow, then what is there to overflow? There's just not life there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you guys are both right on. You know, like reading through James this year has been interesting for me, especially just thinking about the political sort of environment. You know, not as familiar with Canada, but Canada has corruption and crazy politicians like anywhere else, you know, and the States is surely not exempt, you know. And so just the idea of, like, James speaks so much about your speech, you know, like not slandering people, you know, your tongue, the power of the tongue, you know, all these kinds of things. So I think just having conversations with some people about sort of that land on policy over character has been interesting, because I'm like, well, I get where you're coming from, but James says something a little different, you know. Not that policy doesn't matter. Policy matters for sure. But if the vehicle by which you get policy is so tarnished and, you know, divisive and just filled with rancor and just ugliness, then it's like that's not really what God intends for us. So it's been good for me just to kind of wrestle with those things. And I think, like you said, Jennifer, to think about even Job from the fall, you know, and to kind of have this complementary nature of Job with talking about suffering, but then James also picking up some of those same themes is cool. What's the pandemic been like for you all? We touched on it a little bit, but part of what I wanted for us to be able to express to students, you know, during this chapel time is we're human beings. Like I know we're adults, but we're human beings who, are probably just as tired as they are about being on Zoom or having to like work remotely and stuff like that. So what's the pandemic been like for you all, just personally, professionally, whatever?
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I've been sad and lonely a lot of times.
Tell the
uh,
truth, Peter.
which I just shared, knowing that I think that's where so many of you are at listening. Yeah, it's been hard. I think it's been hard for everyone. My heart goes out to, I've got so many friends who are parents of young children, and just like the chaos that they're having to deal with is something so totally different. For me, it's definitely been, as a single guy, with a roommate, but he's gone for work a lot, so just a lot of the pandemic has sort of been on my own, and that's that's pretty irregular for me. That's not something I normally like run straight towards necessarily, and so that's been really tough, to be honest. But but it's been good also, because it's not like, I don't know. I think it's just been needing to sort of confront some of those feelings and thoughts, and it's not like those were things that I never felt before the pandemic. But it's just, primarily, if I felt sad, if I felt lonely, I'd, go visit a friend. I'd go, maybe try and do something for the church. I'd go and do these other things, which very often were really good things, and really helpful ways of sort of coping with the difficulties that life sort of brings along. But for sure, for me, sometimes it was just sort of, you know, let's let's just do something to avoid feeling this way, and the pandemic's made that a lot harder. It's like, okay, well, I guess I can watch YouTube for an hour if that's that's how I want to get around this or whatever. But maybe these are things that I just need to bring to God. Need to focus on myself, and need to just sit with. That's one thing that I've been so struck by, is that pain, difficulty, hardship, uncomfortability sometimes just need to be experienced. There's just not necessarily anything you can do about it all the time. Even thinking back to, like you were saying, Jen, with sort of some of these themes of both of you, of patience and endurance and suffering, and very much, and I love that it's coming from James, like the pastor of Jerusalem, like the pastor of this massive church, passing this on, saying, like, yeah, suffering, hardship, these are parts of life. This is something that you will experience, and and Christ can provide endurance. He will be there with you. You can get through it. And I don't know. I definitely feel like those have been some major things coming up for me throughout all of this. It's like, yeah, life gets really difficult. Life gets really hard sometimes for all sorts of different reasons. And also, we have the ability to endure through that. We can be through that. And God will show up. God will respond when we really invite Him to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Jen?
Yeah. I think because I've been on campus quite a lot through the pandemic, um, my extroverted side has been a little okay. It has been nursed through the isolation at times. And the introverted side of me has, um, yeah, found plenty of nourishment, I guess. So both sides of me find ways of, I think, finding goodness in this space. I think what I found to be the struggle is just the constant changes and the adaptations. And you guys know, I don't know how many people know, probably quite a few now, but I came into this role like no cell phone. I had created a website for Hermitage, so that's good. Like I had done something, but I'm social media. I was only on Facebook because my friend got married and would only post her pictures on Facebook. And whenever I friended people on Facebook, I actually let them know, yes, I'll friend you, but just so you know, I'm never on Facebook. I was really clear, like I just am not on social media, and my technological life was very, very minimalistic. And oh my gosh, like the change in that has just been quite a head spinning kind of experience for me. And so the learning curve has been really quick and fast and intense. And still, I am constantly aware of my shortcomings in that. But also, I think I appreciate more the way I could be technology free. And so my love of technology free has grown, even though my ability to be technology free has definitely diminished. Um, yeah, and I think also having to be aware of planning so many things for both online and in person. I think there's incredible potential in that, and there's a beauty in the way that this has been able to reach globally. Like to see people all over the world deepening in discipleship and deepening in spiritual formation and being able to connect intentionally through these mediums that we really would not have made the effort or intent to use if it hadn't been for this, yeah, for COVID, for this reality we find ourselves in, that it's kind of forced us in that direction. But the global impact that we're able to have because of that, I think is really exciting. And then to get to see, like James, I think you're going to take, Reverend James, you're going to take us in this direction because it's one of your questions about how have we seen Christ work, and that is just to see Christ work in the global, on the global context, personally, like to get to talk to people like this, like we are right now, but all over the world, and that this is kind of our forced reality, but is also pretty, pretty, a pretty, yeah, a good gift of the forced reality. Although I have to say, like at the end of this semester, you guys, I don't know, just again, true confessions, my eyes are starting to go squirrely with all the Zoom, and I try to look long and stare off into space and do all these things. And yeah, I just struggle quite a bit at times with Zoom fatigue and weariness, and just the amount of extra work I think the online environment sometimes requires is tiring.
Yeah, I'm with both of you guys. I think for me, the technology, it's so invasive, you know. I mean, especially because it's like kind of all we've had, you know, for such a for a better part of a year, and so it's in your face all the time. And if you're not up on it, which I wasn't as much either, so in the same boat, you know, Jennifer, it's kind of like I don't want to like download another software thing or try to figure out how to get this Zoom to record for chapel or whatever. It's just it's so constant. So I think that's been a big learning curve. It's been better this semester, because we had the fall to kind of work through some things. Um, I think the biggest thing for me is the technology, but especially I think access. So students out there, I'm not saying I don't want to Zoom with you. Not don't take it that way. It's not personal. But I think it's interesting to me to think about, okay, like what's going to happen when we move back to like a non-Zoom, more face-to-face kind of world. I feel like Zoom and the technology, people mean well, but it's like it gives them, it feels like they have like immediate access to you all the time. So pre-pandemic, if we were going to have a meeting, and let's say we were trying to schedule and find a time and a date, and it just wasn't working out, you just keep kicking it back. Okay, well we'll go to the next week, or what about next Thursday? Whereas in the pandemic, it's like, well, most everybody's working remotely, and it's like, okay, well, what about this time? What about that time? You're still on the same day, because it's like, well, we can just Zoom. Can't you Zoom? You can Zoom before you go to Save On. You can Zoom before, what I mean? So I think that's the weirdest thing for me. I think just trying to navigate all this stuff. Technology is great, but it also has some invasive parts to it. Kind of like you were saying, Jennifer. Just you can't. It's hard to maintain some of the rhythms that are helpful with technology. So.
Yeah, and like you say, Reverend James, the boundaries around technology become much harder to discern. Like, I think, what are these boundaries that we need to set for healthy boundaries? And how do we set those in this environment? I feel like the whole boundaries question has come up for me again this year in ways that I haven't had to deal with in probably over a decade, honestly. Like, and I have to say, this is a shout out to my student leaders, because they are so encouraging to me of boundaries. To, like, I've had students say to me, Jen, go eat. Or I've had students say to me, like, Jen, go home. Like, or what are you doing responding to my chat this time? So I just have to say, like, I have felt so like we are held in a community that is all figuring this out together. And there's been such a gift in that. I think that while I can encourage and challenge and call forth boundaries and encourage and empower students to set those boundaries, I just really appreciate the way my student leaders that I work with, well, like I love hearing that from them as they call that out in me and call that out in their friends and the people they work with.
Wow.
Somebody's at my window, just
That's awesome. They'll be able to see themselves on Chapel on like Friday. Be like, that was me.
Great.
That was me at the window.
We have the ability to tag people.
Yeah, I know.
Leaders. That's right.
Oh.
That's right. The encouraging
voices.
I'm curious for you guys. We'll maybe end like this. What's one thing that when the pandemic is in the rearview mirror and hopefully the world goes back to some kind of semblance of a pre-COVID normal, what's one thing that you feel like you're like, I got to do this thing, whatever that is?
Well, I'm super excited to go see my family again. It's been a year and a half or so since I've been down to Oregon to see everybody. And last year, like right as everything was taken off, I was getting ready to go with a few friends down to my hometown. My parents were selling their house, so we were going to help them, sort of get stuff together. And I was going to show some friends around, my hometown, and just to be able to spend some time with the family. And so it was really sad when that wasn't able to happen. My parents were able to be fine, and it was all good. But yeah, I'm excited to see them. It's been interesting. I feel like in some ways the pandemic has been really helpful for me, even just in like really keeping up with some of those long distance relationships that maybe previously I haven't probably put as much attention into, and it's been more about when can I find time to visit people as opposed to how can I stay consistent with phone calls or video chats or anything like that. But so that's been sweet to stay connected, but definitely, I don't know, I think everyone can sympathize with or appreciate the difference now between being in person with someone, and being on the phone, and you take what you can get, and great to be able to be with them in whatever way you can. But I don't know, excited to give my parents a hug and play tag with my nephews and go out to eat with my brothers, and hopefully have some friends along the way for it.
Awesome. That's old school, Peter. Tag. People don't know about that.
Oh, I'm looking forward to being with my friends in person. I have these really lovely groups of friends that we really listen to one another, we pray with one another, we support one another. We still meet each month. 2 different groups of friends that I meet with each month to really share deep life together and hold each other accountable, call each other out on things. Those friends that you can oh, come on, Jen, you're just trying to pull one on us. They can tell, those kind of friends. And I just so miss seeing them in person. We all live in the BC area. We're kind of not super close, but we used to meet regularly in person. And it's been awesome to be supported by one another through this, but to be able to meet face to face and actually hug each other when we say hello and hug each other when we say goodbye. And yeah, really miss that. And the energy that comes, you can feel people more in a face-to-face space. You can feel their kind of where they're at more, their being. Yeah, just really looking forward to that. And my mom was supposed to come have Christmas with us, um, and she couldn't. And then my brother was hoping to come this summer. His trip was canceled last summer. So just those, they live far away, so I don't miss them in the same way physically that I miss my friends physically because it's like, but still that kind of regular in person being with one another. I can't wait to have. And parties. We used to throw a Christmas party. Every year we throw a neighborhood Christmas party. And it's a big party. We open our house, we have a fire, we set our house up into like 3 different areas for people to hang out and party. And this year, no party. So, yeah, looking forward to having a Christmas party again.
Yeah. Hey, I think we're all on the same theme, being able to be with people, I think that's the thing for me too, being able to go back to the States, see family, see friends and folks that I haven't seen in years now. I mean, so that's the thing I'm looking forward to. I will say though, as much as I want to see people, and that's probably the biggest thing on my agenda, um, I really like New Orleans. My wife and I have been to New Orleans probably 7 or 8 times, just for various kind of service projects and taking students there back when we were in the States for different trips. And if you haven't been to New Orleans, students, it's a great place to go. Real all kinds of diverse food and history and culture there. And so I do miss being able to go to New Orleans and get some beignets, all kinds of chicken and sandwiches and all kinds of good stuff. So looking forward to that too.
That sounds amazing. I've never
Yeah, I
been
might
to
have to
New
change
Orleans.
my
I want to
answer.
go now.
Yeah.
Hey, any donors out there? I'm just saying, student ministries love to be able
Jumbo
to.
fund.
There you go. We can have like a
Yes.
GoFundMe or something for Jesus. Well, thank you guys for taking some time, and students. We're still here. We're around. We can hit us up on Zoom or do things in person as it's appropriate. We want to just continue to be a resource for you all, and hope you're still tuning into chapel, hang in there with us. Only not that many more weeks left. So, but we're around and praying for you, and happy to chat with you and help however we can.